understand that from my life experiences is that if, say, I value family, and within my value of family, I value providing for my family. And my organization does not share the same values as me. They just don't. But within working for that organization, I'm capable of bringing home a paycheck to provide for my family. Then there is some utility in working for that company. And it reminds me back of, so there are things that you can accomplish that within an organization that, yeah, they might not align completely with your values, but you could still get some of your values met by working within that organization. If you think about it, if you know your own values and then you know how to operate accordingly. One of the things I was thinking about is this Alan Einstein quote that we are just talking about, that the world, evil happens because people just sit there and do nothing. If an organization does not operate by your values and you're a leader and a manager and a graduate from the Bachelor's of Applied Science program and you've been through Professor Kirshner's class, maybe you're called to be in that organization and to be of influence to the leaders in that organization. And then possibly over time, that organization can change because of you. So that's something else to consider, that, being in an environment that doesn't always share your values, there could be good that comes from that. And there could be a lot of fulfilling things that happen in your life because of your willingness to engage with people, places that don't always operate the way you operate. And the more and more we talk in this class, it will be evident, very evident, that it's difficult to find people that match and share all of your values and beliefs and your behaviors and attitudes towards things. Almost impossible, because everybody is uniquely and wonderfully made in creative way. So there is no other me. And these will be some topics we'll explore more, but individual preferences, individual behaviors, individual likes, interests, desires, those matter. And sometimes that can be a source of conflict, or sometimes that can be a source of growth. It depends. All right, so let's go to some of the slides, and we'll get through probably about half of them tonight. But I want to ask some of these questions first, just to get you thinking about your principles and values. So there's two ways to answer this question. In your mind, if you have a piece of paper, get it out, or if you have a Word document or an iPad next to you, get that out. And all I want you to do is just put 1 through 10. So there's going to be 10 questions. And next to each one, just write either mostly true or mostly false. So it's a binary question. It's either mostly true or mostly false. And these questions will lead to sort of a summary, assessing yourself essentially for some of your moral clarity, I guess, within organizations. So here's the first one. Is it mostly true or mostly false for you? I can. So it's going to be a self statement. And after the self statement, you think to yourself, mostly true, mostly false. So here's the statement. I can clearly state the principles and values that guide my actions. Is that mostly true or mostly false for you? The second one is I quickly acknowledge my mistakes and take responsibility for them. Is that mostly true or mostly false for you? The third one is I am able to quickly forgive and forget when someone has made a serious mistake that affected me. Mostly true. I can forgive and forget. But mostly false. It takes me some time to forgive and forget. Forgiving is one thing. Forgetting is, it's like two questions in one there. Number four, when making a difficult decision, I take time to assess my principles and values. Mostly true, mostly false. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay, good.
Yes.
Number five is I have a reputation among my friends and coworkers for keeping my word. Mostly true, mostly false. Number six is I am completely honest and can be trusted to tell the truth. Mostly true, mostly false. Seven is when someone asks me to keep a confidence, I always do so completely. Hey, what I'm about to tell you, I don't want you to share with anyone. Can you please keep this in confidence? Typically, when someone says that to me, I'm like, well, you know what? Just don't tell me. Like, please. I'd rather not know. Okay, eight is I hold others accountable for using ethical practices in their work. Mostly true, mostly false. Number nine is I insist on doing what is fair and ethical, even when it is not easy. That's the integrity component. 10 is my coworkers would say that my behavior is very consistent with my values. We're going to talk through values in a moment. Okay, so you should have a list of paper or a list of numbers, and next to numbers, you should have mostly trues or mostly falses. You either wrote it down or you did it on a Word document. So here's the way this scores. And essentially, you want to be able to have mostly trues for all of them. But here is the interpretation. Each of these items pertains to some aspect of ethical maturity in a group situation, not just individual, but as a group. So it's one thing for me to proclaim being an ethical human within my own head, but the way I act with other people is the true reflection of my ethics and my morals and my values. So, which also reflects a person's level of moral development. Count the number of checks for mostly true. If you scored seven or more, congratulations. That behavior suggests you would be near level three, which depicts the level of moral development. The post conventional level of development, we'll talk about that in a minute, means that you consider principles and values, take personal responsibility, and do not blame others, which is a good thing. Post conventional. You may have highly developed ethical sense. A lower school score suggests that you may be at the conventional or even pre-conventional levels. A score less than five indicates that you may avoid difficult issues or have not been in situations that challenged your ethical values. Study the specific questions for which you scored mostly true and mostly false. To learn more about your specific strengths and weaknesses, think about what influences your ethical behavior and decisions, such as a need for success or approval. Fascinating. All right, so this image I have on screen, I'm not going to complicate it, and I want to do some terms first, but we just talked about these things called post-conventional, conventional, and pre-conventional. And think about this for a second. We're going to talk about this thing called codified law. So we have laws within our society, and typically we have to abide by these laws. If we don't abide by these laws, we get in trouble, we get in legal issues, we might get arrested and put in jail. We don't want that. So we just abide by the law. We do the bare minimum of what is expected for us not to get in trouble. This is a pre-conventional level. So if you think about it, it's level one of moral development. Pre-conventional follows rules to avoid punishment, acts in own interest, meaning I'm here to fulfill my desires, my interests. I'm really trying to appease my needs, and that's what my how my some of my children act in some sense, but also how some adults act. Obedience for its own sake. They just don't want to get in trouble. And when people are at this level of moral development, they have a lot of self-interest. And believe me, there's a lot of times where well, I won't speak for you, that where I act within my own self-interest because I have to. And sometimes some of the way in which I act is pre-conventional. Let's move up to these societal expectations. So now we're making sure we're not going to get punished. We're trying to avoid failure. We have self-interest. Okay, cool. Congratulations. Now, if we can move and have sort of a transformational experience, a revelatory interaction with somebody that changes us from level one to level two, now we're at the conventional level. So lives up to expectations of others. So it's not just about me, it's about others. It's about the team, it's about the company, it's about the purpose, it's about the mission. So now we're moving. Okay, so I'm not here just to make sure I sound good teaching you sound business principles about ethics. I'm here to truly care about your development as business students at Miami-Dade College. I really want that for you. So now I'm at the level two conventional level, lives up to expectations of others, fulfills duties and obligations of social system, upholds laws, doesn't just abide by laws, but sees somebody doing something wrong and actually, reports it to the police or actually says something or actually tries to enforce rules around their neighborhood, around their HOA, and this kind of stuff. So it's a different kind of level. Okay, level two. Now we're moving to level three. We'll leave the leadership style and employee behavior alone for now, but those are fascinating ones. So this is post-conventional. These are the folks that scored seven or above on that little test that we just took. And this is now we're moving into an internal value system. We're truly doing things not just for self-interest and societal interest. We believe in something we believe in the meaning of things. So follows self-chosen principles of justice and right, aware that people hold different values, which is very important. We just talked about that, and seeks creative solutions to ethical dilemmas, which there's a ton of ethical dilemmas happening every day all around us. Balances concern for individual with concern for common good. This is the post-conventional level. This is like level five leadership. This is transforming or servant leadership, empowering employees, full participation in conversations, not having a skewed bias and just judging people, having a pause in between a triggering comment or triggering event, you pause and then you ask what would be sort of questions. You're interested. What was that? How come you said that way? Why do you believe that? This kind of stuff, as opposed to responding. If you look down at that level one level, you're looking at an autocratic, coercive leadership style, and the employees' behaviors are just task accomplishment. If you're a leader in a situation at pre-conventional, you're going to act as an autocratic leader, and you're going to want people to just do stuff for you. So that's just a little bit about that pre-conventional, post-conventional. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, and I just skipped a bunch of slides, as you can tell, let's talk about ethics. What are ethics? Why are ethics important? Even just thinking about this term ethics, it's very hard not to philosophize, to think about philosophy, to think about theology, to think about human nature and desire and psychology and needs, desires, wants, higher powers, these kind of questions. And inevitably, these questions are baked into the concept of ethics. What is good? What is evil? Why is it important? What are the types of, why do I act the way I act? Do I even is my culture better than another culture? That's a prominent one to think about. Or are all people created equal? I mean, it's not an or, all people are created equal according to whom? Does everybody abide by that? I mean, these kinds of ethical conversations, moral dilemmas are happening all around us. And if we can really bake into why do we behave the way we behave in these organizational contexts, we have to take a step back and we have to think about these things. So ethics is a code of moral principles and values that governs the behaviors of a person or group with respect to what is right or wrong. So baked into the definition of ethics is somebody in some position of power somewhere is defining what's right and what's wrong. And our society that we're currently living in, a lot of those decisions, and that's why I bring up philosophy, have already been made for us at some point in the past. And even we might not be aware of it. We might think we're living on our own. Don't tread on me. I got my property out here. You can't tell me what to do. Well, I can tell you I'm not going to pick up your garbage on Monday. I'm picking it up on Tuesday. You can't tell me to pick it up on Tuesday. I could tell you that you can't fly a drone, 600 feet in the air. And I could tell you that you have to put clothes on when you walk outside in your neighborhood. Like this, we might think that we're living in this free choice, free nation, but there are rules that are guiding our behavior, and these rules are defined in ethical ways. So there's three different things to think about in this conversation. A lot of what we're going to talk about is free choice in this class, and I talked a little bit about them. Codified law. These are the values and standards written into the legal system and enforceable in the courts. You could say that any organization also has codified law. We don't steal. We don't take the company truck up to Orlando for the weekend because we don't want to do that. We don't curse out customers that are disrespectful. I mean, these are things that are probably written into some code of conduct somewhere within an organization that you work for. If you don't have them in a code of conduct, they're not written down, but they're probably espoused by the leaders. You sort of act the way other people act, and people don't curse customers out when they're upset. They try to solve their problems. It's just sort of what we do around here. Then we have free choice, behavior not covered by law and for which an individual has complete freedom. And then you have ethics, standards of conduct based on shared principles and values about moral conduct. What is so fascinating, and a lot of the class we're going to talk about as leaders and as employees in an organization, is that, like we talked about in the real estate person, the pit bull example of the lady that stole the person's client, you know, just because something is not just because something is legal, meaning you're not going to get put in jail for it, you're not going to get fired, you can do it, does not mean it's ethical. And I think that's really where we're going to start is then, okay, then why can't we do it? Well, it's not the right thing to do. Well, who says it's not the right thing to do? Well, Jim says it's not the right thing to do. Well, who's Jim? And how come he's dictating the rules around here? Well, Jim's the president of the company. And, well, Jim doesn't know what he's talking about. I think we need to change the rule. Well, I better bring that up with Jim. I don't want to bring it up to Jim. I'm just going to gossip to you. Just going to tell everybody else around here that Jim doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, is that illegal? No, but Jim's the president of the company, so you're sort of gossiping about our leader. Is that going to work out for you? What are you going to have a mutiny and build a coalition and overtake the company? Like, where does that end? What is the purpose of that? So you get the idea. There's a lot of fascinating dilemmas that people like that could experience if that's how they live their life. So again, images. I like these diagrams. Take a look at this, what I put on the screen, and see what we're talking about here. The more laws we have, I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a society where I'm told what color shirt I have to wear, and I'm told what I have to eat in the morning, and I'm told all of these different laws. I don't have much choice. I just obey the law, and there's so many laws that I'm sort of stuck in the system. So that's what codified law. The more codified law we have, the less free choice we have. That's kind of what this is talking about here. The explicit control of the codified law says you got to do what I say you're going to do. Because if you don't do what I say you're going to do, you're going to get arrested, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get fined, you're going to get fired, whatever that looks like. So if you're in an organization, the more rules, the more regulation you have, the less free choice people are going to have. The less free choice they have, the less they can be creative, the less they can contribute on their own autonomy, the more they're going to feel trapped and buried down. So yes, ethics is important. And yes, we should have some standards and rules of how we behave, but there should be some social norms that we allow to have happen. That's the domain of social standards and ethics. And it's kind of what we're talking about here, the code of conduct kind of thing. And then we should also leave a lot of room for people to make choices, make decisions, make free choices, have autonomy over how you act, come up with creative solutions. Just do it in a way that's possibly not just constructive for you, but constructive for the people around you. So that's a fascinating thing to think about. So in this class, we're going to talk about values often. The question is, what are values? Why are values important? And enduring beliefs and ideals that are socially enforced are values. And we can speak for values of ourselves, our individual values. And within our individual values, and bear with me, but and I know this is a lot, but there's two types. There's values called instrumental values, and there's value called terminal values. Now, let me give you an example. An instrumental value to me, let's start with the terminal value. Terminal values, I want to be a good father. Okay, good. I want to be a good father. That's cool. That's like what I want to end up as. You know, in my gravestone or in my eulogy, I want people to say he was a good father. That's the terminal value. But an instrumental value is, well, I got to work hard. An instrument, I have to be a good communicator. I have to learn how to, um, get along with people. These are instrumental values: hard work, interpersonal skills, communication. That's those instrumental values are going to lead me up to the terminal value of being a good father. So that's an individual level. My household has different values. My family, my let's say my extended family, my mom, I'm sorry, my dad, my stepmom, my little brother, my in-laws, like we sort of value freedom, independence. We value hard work. We have our family values, and then we have our community. Our community values different things, and then we have our state, and then we have our organization. So our community, our organization. What company do I work for? Miami-Dade College. What do we value at Miami-Dade College? We value student learning. We value success of students. We value use of artificial intelligence. We value student engagement, this kind of stuff. And then we have our state, then we have our country, and then we have our world. And do we even have a set of shared values within these areas? So values aren't just at the individual level; they're at a bunch of different levels as well. So more, I'm not going to get into morals. What is it saying? Is ethical culture good or is ethical culture bad? You say it's good, that means you think profits are good too, because the independent variable over here is ethical culture. The outcome is profit. So how about profits? Is profits good? So what if we replace this, and anyone can answer this, with performance culture? Up-performance culture could lead to employee commitment and trust. It could lead to investor loyalty and trust. It could lead to customer satisfaction and trust. But it depends. It depends on how far you go with your performance. And certainly performance is going to equal profits. And the reason I put performance up here is this slide is equating, in a sense, having an ethical culture means that you're going to perform better. So it's in a way virtue signaling and saying, hey, if you want to be successful as a company, if you want to perform, you better have an ethical culture, because your ethical culture is going to dictate whether or not your employees trust you, whether or not your investors trust you, and whether or not your customers trust you. So when I say it like that, it makes a little bit more sense. But this chart is also saying ethical cultures help you perform better. And that's kind of the where I'm trying to get to without saying it. But performance is good, and you can perform within an ethical culture. If it was just performance and there was no ethics baked in, say it's an unethical performance, it's a, eat what you kill, work hard, and nobody cares, and everybody for themselves, and we're just here to win, and that's it. And how you get there, the means in which you use to get the outcome doesn't matter as long as you get the outcome. That's a problem. There was a story about Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo, a lot of the business folks talk about this particular story, was something called an unintended consequence. They were trying to incentivize their staff members to have their customers open up debit cards. And when you open up a debit card, they charge you like 3, $4 a month just to have the card. It's You could look to see if you're getting these fees, and unless you have a certain balance in the account. So opening up debit cards helps them increase their revenue very simply. And it's easy for them to ask customers to open up debit cards. You just ask them, you get the verbal approval, and you just open up debit card form, and that's fine. So what they were doing is they started to create debit cards that were fictitious and fraudulent debit cards on people that have passed away, people that really aren't even people. They would have social security numbers. So the sales was so competitive that they started fraudulently opening up debit cards for people or past people or whatever, to the point where they got caught, and the organization was now in the news, and Wells Fargo got into a ton of trouble for it. And the person that set up that incentive to begin with, even though they had no idea that these negative consequences were going to take place, that person got fired, and all of the other people that were the byproducts of that performance-based campaign were also fired. They didn't set out to be unethical. They just were driven solely by performance, and there wasn't enough ethical decision making baked into the performance. So again, it's not a it's not a black or white, one or two kind of easy question to answer. And what that means is when you create an organizational control system, what you're trying to control is people's behaviors. And an element of an organizational control system is an incentive. If people are incentivized to do certain things, there could be behaviors that are created because of the incentive that are not behaviors that you had originally intended. And so that's why the concepts of codified law and free choice and code of conducts, and then you have incentive systems. It matters. And back to this chart is that what this is trying to say is that if you don't consider ethics in a managerial position, if you don't consider ethics within your team, and you don't have some level of standards on how you behave, what you believe is right or wrong, you could very well not be trusted by your employees, not be trusted by your investors, and not be trusted by your customers. And that's a problem. And that won't mean you're going to be able to attain profits. So it's saying ethics matter. Here's another one to consider. I'm running a business and I want to make money. So the most important thing to me, why wouldn't my customers be bigger and my employees be bigger? And shareholders, they're kind of important, but not really. My community, let's keep it small over here. And suppliers, they work for us, so we'll treat them however we want. These are equally sized. So it's saying that all of these people matter. They're called stakeholders, but it's saying none of them matter more than the other. Does that make sense? So how we treat and how we interact with, how we deal with our suppliers, we should treat them with respect, with dignity, with integrity. We should speak honestly and openly with them the same way we speak to our customers. Treat them with respect, honesty, integrity, the same way we should treat our employees. That our customers are very important to us. They're very important. But our employees are equally as important as our customers. This is the stakeholder model that we'll talk a lot about in business ethics, because truly an organization that exists in our society, in our world, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist in a silo. It's impacting the people around them. And yes, I mean there's a whole school of thought that would consider an organization to be solely meant to drive shareholder value. And that's it. That's all organizations are for. And all these other stakeholders, yeah, they're important, but shareholder value is the most important. And we got to do whatever it takes to make sure our shareholders get dividends and to make sure that their stock increases in value. And there's some strong arguments in that case. And we'll strawman those arguments. We'll talk about them. We'll steelman them. We'll talk about all sorts of ways that that argument is and can still be valid in a lot of ways. Yet, another argument that is obvious is that yes, shareholder value is important, but we also have communities that we're serving. We also have employees that matter to us and that we care about. We also have suppliers that we've had relationships with for 20 years, and we're willing to serve them just as much as we're willing to serve our shareholders. One of the conscious capitalism is a fun term to think about. It's about people, profits, and planet. So, yeah, profits is important, but we're also measuring our impact on people. We're also measuring our impact on the planet. Like, how are we positively contributing to this world that we live in? And so, the triple bottom line is what they call that, and the term that is used often around those conversations is conscious capitalism. All right, so four types of ethical manager behavior. Let's um let's take a look at this for a second. Yeah, the thought that comes to my mind is that behaviors are better caught than taught. It's the managers who walk out and behave ethically consistently that have the most influence on us because we're watching them, we're modeling their behaviors, as opposed to a manager that says, "Hey, you should treat people well," and you see them every day talking down to people and being negative, speaking ugly, essentially, and they say one thing, but they do it differently. And I think that that's the essence of what this means. And what it means to me is that being an ethical manager is not a one time, one day in the morning, I'm ethical, and in the afternoon, I'm sort of tired. So I'm slacking a little bit. I'm not really as nice as I was in the morning. No, it's all the time, every day, consistently walking out of our ability to display honesty and integrity. And whether it goes over to the left to show kindness, or whether it goes over to the right to communicate and enforce, not just communicate, but have justice essentially for those that are not behaving ethically in this organization. So enforcing ethical standards through their behavior and through other people's behavior. And then, of course, they're fair in decisions and distribution of rewards. And yeah, they're showing kindness, compassion, and concern for needs and feelings of others. Let me tell you something. This might read well, it might sound great, but it's not easy to do consistently because organizations can be a tough place. Hardness is real. You get sick. You have a you might be we have a temptation to be lazy. Maybe we instead of taking a call at the office, we want to take the call from the car. But we should really stay in the office because it requires us to be on the computer. But nobody will know. We just get in a car. No, like that's not the consistency circle that we see. So I love how the first person that participated, I didn't catch the name that was talking about the her manager and how she got to see a person operate like this, and that is a powerful concept. I have as well, and I currently work for a chair right now that is just amazing. And in addition to that, I have seen the opposite of this. I have worked for or under people who did not display these kinds of behaviors. So this is just an example of what I would consider, and what maybe other people in this call do as well, of a consistency of ethical behavior from a manager. I want to say this one thing just to consider what we're talking about, at least in chapter one, is why are ethics important? Do they have an impact on the performance of an organization? Ethics do matter in performance. Our society is going to be constantly reminding us of ethical decisions that we must make because of our free choice. Business and ethics, they go hand in hand. And let me try to explain why. If you are make some level of success in business, and we talked about playing the games and playing by the rules and all this kind of stuff, and if you know of a person named Bernie Madoff, that over time, Bernie Madoff was consistently making the right decisions, and all of a sudden he made one bad decision. And then because of that one bad decision, he tried to cover it up and he made another bad decision. And then he made another bad decision. So it was that one little crack in his armor that he allowed a bad decision to come into his heart. And then he ended up running a Ponzi scheme for millions, if not billions of dollars, getting arrested, national news story, went to prison, and died of health issues in prison. That was the way he spent his retirement years in life. He couldn't do anything with his money in prison. And unfortunately, his legacy was dismantled because of that one little decision that he made. My goal is to get you to think about those things and think about those decisions in your personal life and certainly your professional life, and to consider that an organization is an opportune time to understand how ethics perform. And just one last point. The conversation really kind of came about in the 1960s when business ethics really started becoming more of a thing because capitalism was getting blamed for a lot of the difficulties in our society. And President John F. Kennedy, he passed the Consumer's Bill of Rights, a right to safety, a right to be informed, a right to choose, and a right to be heard. So consumers started getting more power and employees started getting more power, and society started seeing and holding businesses to become more accountable to some of the ways that were impacting people or in society. And then President Lyndon B. Johnson, the Great Society, extended national capitalism with the US government's responsibility to provide all citizens with some degree of economic stability, equality, and social justice. And this is what spurred the movement of how do we get organizations to be more considerate and have some kinds of codes of ethics. Because certainly within our society, and with philosophy and the time of antiquity, essentially all of human history, we've had to consider these conversations. So we also need to consider these conversations within the context of business. But certainly you can structure an organization in order to be sustainable. So I think I hear what you're saying there. So the overlapping nature of this is basically inferring that in order to be a sustainable company, you have to think about the planet, you have to think about people, and you have to think about profit. We have I've been a part of a program that is called Entrepreneurial Experience in South Africa. I think I told you about that. And we were the gentleman who ran the program, Dr. Morris, he created a book. It's 80 Steps to Sustainability. And so, how he defines sustainability is an organization that can simply stand on its two legs. It can employ people, it can make payroll, it has customers, and it provides a lifestyle for the entrepreneur. And these are usually businesses that are at some kind of disadvantage. There's circumstances around the business where it's not likely that they're going to succeed. So, sustainability in that term is just making sure the business can survive. In this term, it's saying, no, 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 that's not good enough. Sustainability also needs to take into account your measures of social performance, treatment, how you treat your employees, fair labor practices, that kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, we're going to put a little bit more pressure on you, Mr. Business Owner or entrepreneur leader, that you also have to take care of the planet. You have to make sure that your footprint, your ecological impact on the environment is positive. It's not no impact. It's a positive impact in a sense. Is that fair to put that kind of pressure on a business? And should a business be focused on these three metrics? When structure came to mind, it's how can we structure the company so that, yeah, it would be nice to do all these things, but it's not, so it's sufficient, but it's not needed. Like it's important and we value it, but it shouldn't be the beginning, or it should be the only goal. The goal is survivability. It's being able to stay in business. It's being able to operate. I know this lady from Oak Aquatics very well. We actually bid because we were in the pool construction business. We bid the construction of one of their indoor facilities, and the owner of it actually is the wife of a gentleman that teaches with me at Miami-Dade College. So it's very fascinating. She is a unique human being, and what they're doing with the employees is called an ESOP. It's an employee stock ownership plan, and it's an incentive structure. And you see, this is the funny thing with ethics is that is a wonderful thing to do. Yet part of doing that is so that the employees are incentivized to keep the business sustainable. So there's a little bit of a selfish interest in it as well. Yes, we're giving and we're loving and we're trying to help people, but even in business and in the context of business is tricky. And that's why there's no thing. How could you ever say there's no intrinsic desire. Like I'm actually trying to do this for myself, and I'm going to help you so that you can help me, kind of thing. And I'm not, commenting on her decisions nor anyone else's decisions. Just think about that. There's a study that I did on, it was corporate social responsibility during a pandemic, which is a black swan event. So if I do corporate social responsibility on a typical Tuesday and people like it, and the outcome variable that we're looking for is brand loyalty and brand trust. So does corporate social responsibility create brand loyalty and brand trust? The answer is usually yes. But what happens is when there's a pandemic, our hypothesis was that the brand loyalty and brand trust is mediated, meaning the brand loyalty and brand trust is increased when you have a black swan event. So if you're like, let's just say something, there's a hurricane that hits, and you find out that Baptist Health is providing free generators to everybody in the community. In a situation like that, are you more likely to trust a company like Baptist Health because during a time of need, they're committing corporate social responsibility events? But then the answer is, the question you should ask yourself is this: why are they doing it? Why are they providing these generators? So that people like their company more? Well, that's inherently an intrinsic selfish desire. Or are they doing it because they want to do it because they're altruistic and they just want to help people? And so that would be an extrinsic desire. So those are the two things we looked at. And one of the fascinating things, and I don't want to get too into it, but it was this information seeking behavior. Is during a black swan event, like when something catastrophic happens, consumers are much more prone to look things up. Like think about when COVID hit, you're like, what is this thing? Like you're looking at the news, you're watching the news, you're doing internet searches, you're trying to understand the protocols and the procedures. How do we do this? What do we do? Can I prevent it? Do I have to wipe the feet of my dog when my dog comes in from outside? Like, what does this thing look like? So during those times, because people are more susceptible to looking at information, it tends to be that these corporate social responsibility things are more impactful for brand trust. So what's fascinating about it, it depends on the motive. It depends on the context, like the context it's in, and it depends on the effectiveness of these corporate social responsibility campaigns. And idealistically, we want our business to have a positive impact on as many people as possible. But is that realistic? Idealistic is one thing, realistic is something else. So just some things to consider. Okay, I put another one on here. Let me know what you guys think. This is a picture of a little building, and it says the ethical organization, and it has two essentially columns. One is values oriented, and the other one is structure oriented. If you have an organization that says, let's use some different examples here, that our value is customer service. Let's just say customer service. That's great. You can value customer service, but the question is, have you structured your company where you have a sufficient amount of people in the customer service department to provide excellent customer service? And do those customer service people have the resources they need? Do they have the training? Do they have, the funny one is sometimes you say, oh, we value customer service. And then a customer calls in and says, hey, I need somebody to come back over here. They didn't finish mowing the grass appropriately. Can you have them come back? And so the customer service person says, yeah, of course, I'll call them and I'll send them back. Then they call the crew leader, or they call the person that is in charge of the crew and say, hey, can you go back? And they say, we're not going back there, this person's house. We were just there and the grass is cut fine. And they hang up the phone. So because the customer service person doesn't have the authority to write them up, or, you know, do something that could be consequences to that crew leader, the crew leader does whatever he wants. And therefore, the customer service agent or the customer service person is going to get angry because they say we value customer service. That is a core value here. Yet they're designing the organization so that customer service is not enforced. So that's what this really kind of means to me, is that you can have these values, which is very good to have a value driven organization. And then you have to have systems within your company, and you have to set up your company, and you have to have chain of command based on your values. Let me give you one more example. This guy, Dick's Sporting Goods. His name is gosh, what's this guy's name? I heard him speak. Maybe his name will come to me, but he's the chairman, and he was, I think, the son of the owner for a long, long time. And yeah, amazing guy. And he seems like he's a man of principles. And he said that the most important person in his organizational environment is the customer. And they call the customer, not the customer, they call the customer the athlete. And the athlete is at the very top of the hierarchy. Even if the athlete doesn't have a position in the company, they sit at the top of the hierarchy. And God, what is this guy's name? He's at the bottom of the hierarchy, and he has his store representatives, which are the people who check people out and the managers of stores, sitting at the corners of the pyramid, and then the diamond, and then coming down the diamond, he has some of his executive leaders, and then at the bottom is him. And this is what this guy says. I wish, gosh, somebody could look up his name. That would be great. The chairman of the board of Dick's Sporting Goods. So he basically says, I what I do is I have to listen. The people at the top of the pyramid, the athlete, we want to solicit as much feedback as we possibly can from them. The store representative should be talking the most in our hierarchy. The VP should be doing more listening than talking, but they should still be talking to me. I need to talk 20% of the time and listen 80% of the time because I need information from my athlete. So he structured his organization around his value. That's an important concept. So our organizations, let's say that this company, Thananos, let's say that they really did want to improve blood testing and they really did care about the tough process with the people who have blood, so the patients, and if they really did care about that, and they said that that's what they wanted to do. Was this lady Holmes, did she actually structure an organization that abided by that value? And most likely not, because the structure would have had checks and balances in it and would have had a ton or a power oriented around the people who cared most for the patient, not the people who cared most for the investors. She probably empowered the people who cared most about raising money and going public and this kind of stuff, as opposed to, empowering the department and setting the structure around the department that cared most about the patient. So if that makes any sense, that's what this that's what this means to me. So let's go on to the next one. Any comments on that? Or what is
It's
this guy's name? Did anybody?
Edward W. Stack. Is that it?
Stack, Ed Stack. Yeah, that's his name. It's Ed Stack. He spoke at University of Miami. And that's where I heard that story, and I repeated it many times since. Okay, so ethical management today. Ethical lapses have been pervasive, and this is we'll get into a little bit of the history, hopefully, and as we continue throughout this, about why we've gotten to this place today where in college you have to study something called business ethics. It's a different book, by the way. Like, where did this come about? Well, business unfortunately has gotten a bad rap because of certain things that have happened. And I'm just going to read a quick story, which is kind of from a philosophical perspective, has been deemed false, but just think about it. It's called relativism and the game of business. Remember, I talked about business as sort of like a game. Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it sort of isn't. There's more to it than that. So think about the game of poker. Poker's own brand of ethics is different from the ethical ideals of civilized human relationships. The game calls for distrust of other fellows. It ignores the claim of friendship. Cunning deception and concealment of one's strength and intentions, not kindness and open heartedness, are vital in poker. And this goes back to the comment that somebody made about, any business is you're not my friend. Like I'm here for business. And there could be something to say or claim to be made there. So that's up for you to infer. No one thinks any the worse of poker on that account, meaning we all understand the game of poker. We don't think ill of it, but we understand the deception and the cunning nature of the game. And no one should think any the worse of the game of business because its standards of right and wrong differ from the prevailing traditions of morality in our society. Interesting premise because there's a concept called social exchange theory. And let's just think about this. We're in a class right now. Most of you are paying to be in this class. You might have financial aid, you might have some level of, it might be you paying, it might be your parents paying. You expect something from me. You're not here to hang out with me and talk to me about, how my day was. You want me to edify you and educate you on business. That's why you're here. So the premise of our exchange is delivering value. You pay the tuition fees, I educate somehow. So would we be in a working relationship if it wasn't for that clear exchange, that clear delivery of concepts? So in business, it's very similar. It's I have something you want, and you're going to give it to me, and I'm going to pay you whatever I deem worthy of this value that you're offering. So think about it this way: when we were way back in the day when we had villages and clans and tribes and we were just trying to make it in the woods, as we evolved as humans. I'm more of a creationist, but evolution certainly is a powerful argument as well. And also the reality is you got your tribe over here and you guys are really good at baking bread and you've mastered the bread baking business. This is great. And there's another tribe over there that's amazing at baking tomato soup just to make it fun. Like they got the best tomato soup in the entire world. So over here, you got the best bread in the whole world, and over here is the soup. If these two clans were to meet each other in some kind of way, they would inherently have conflict, because there's too many things that they don't trust, they don't know you, whatever it is. But if they were to begin the process, which this is like sort of one of those things when, it's a bonding experience that when you share meals with people, when you share something with somebody, it sort of bonds you. And so what they would do is they would leave bread in a certain location for that tribe to come and like take the bread. And then if they took the bread, they would leave the tomato soup. And eventually they get into this relationship of exchange. We make the good bread, you make the good tomato soup. Let's start exchanging. And that's like the premise of what business is. It's exchanging value. And in that exchange of value, there is an inherent interest, if you think about it, of, I mean, I'm just going to read this, of some kind of personal ego. Well, we make the best bread. Well, we make the best tomato soup. You want what I want. I want what you want. Okay, let's make a deal. There's some greed there, pressure to increase profit. So now you say to yourself, well, I think our bread is actually better than your tomato soup. So we're not going to give you as much bread anymore. We want more tomato soup. Well, I don't, there's an inherent potential greed in that exchange. So it's difficult. And I had a friend for a long, long time who was a customer of ours. And this goes back to that thing. And we messed up on his pool service, their family's pool service. We didn't do what we were supposed to do, admittedly. And so the next day he fired us. He didn't call me. He didn't talk to me at all. He just called the office, he fired us, and we no longer service the pool. I found out about this from somebody, and I called him. I said, "Dude, what's up, man? You could have just called me. I would have done something for you. Why did you just do that?" He's like, "Oh, no, no, it's just business. Don't worry. We're still friends. It's just business." And I was like, "Well, you know, no, it's not. And it's not just business to me. I mean, you could have called me. You're my friend. You claim to be my friend. How come you didn't call me?" "Oh, no, don't worry. It's just business." So again, just a story to think about some of these topics that we're discussing here. Unethical behavior has many causes. Managers carry a big responsibility for setting an ethical climate. Okay, so here's a participative one. There is a box over here, if you're looking at the screen to the left, with one line in it, and there's a box over to the right with three lines in it. So I'll just ask, which box to the right is one, two, or three the same size as the box to the left with the single line? Which one is correct? The same size. There's a correct answer, and the correct answer is two. It's clear. I mean, it's pretty evident. But the moral test here is about conformity. So for whatever reason, I you may think that I have some wizard behind the curtain over here giving some special power to me because I'm sitting in front of this mic talking to you guys about business ethics. Who then tell you that number two is wrong. And if anybody said when I said number two is wrong, you guys should have said BS. Like number two is wrong. No, it's the same exact size. Like it's definitely not three. But the reality is, some people will inherently, understandably, be like, all right, well, he's the professor. He said it's wrong. I trust him. It's wrong. Let's go with number three. And it's called groupthink. And this is a big deal. And a person with charisma and a person in a position of power tells you something, and you just believe them. You just say, hey, you know what? This guy, I trust him. He's in the CEO spot, and let's just move with it. If you want to know more about that test, I think it's a fascinating test. Um, because I mean, there's all sorts of different experiments on it. One of the craziest ones is this shock treatment experiment where they put a person in a doctor's coat, and they have them sit in a room where they have a speaker, where they can hear. The doctor tells the person that is the participant in the study. He says, "All right, listen, there's another person in the room, and these buttons here, they're going to administer shocks. And there's a little lever that says higher shock or more electricity versus less electricity." And so the doctor stands there and says, "Okay, press the button." And the guy presses the button. It's like a low level, and you can hear the other person go, "Oh, oh, that hurt." And then the doctor goes, "Okay, well, raise up the level a little bit." And the guy's like, "Oh, really? I mean, I'm going to raise up the level." So he raises up, he presses the button, shocks the guy again. He goes, "Ah." You could hear the person in the other room you know, getting upset because and pain is getting inflicted to them. And the experiment was really, it probably wouldn't be able to do experiments like this today with the IRB reviews, but it was demonstrating that just putting a doctor's coat on and giving a person orders for whatever reason makes them feel as if they have to follow these orders. It's a powerful concept. What do you see the point that I'm trying to make about authority and how authority can influence the people that are working underneath that authority? That it's a conformity thing, and conformity in business matters. Sometimes we have a desire to conform, understandable. There's a personality trait. If you look at the big five personality traits, from it's conscientiousness, it's extroversion, it's agreeableness, it's neuroticism, and then open-mindedness. So those are five of them. And there's the agreeableness means, if I said to you right now, an elephant would make a good pet, and you're like, okay, I kind of think so. You have a tendency to be agreeable. A person who is disagreeable is a person that was like, no, of course an elephant will make a good pet. What are you, crazy? Why would an elephant make a good pet? So those who are agreeable tend to make more friends. They tend to interview better. They're usually more socially acceptable, but there's a downside to that. Those that are too agreeable tend to fall victim to being naive and being manipulated by other people. So it's a little bit off topic there, but I'm sure you can see how it relates. So here's what's happening. Abusive behavior within organizations, it's a problem. This particular study of workforce misconduct or observed misconduct in the US workforce had thousands of participants, and 50% of them said, in my workplace, I have observed misconduct. 50% of them. And of that misconduct, it's abusive behavior, lying to employees and external stakeholders. External stakeholders would be, investors, community members, suppliers, that kind of stuff. Conflicts of interest, which means that I have a goal here to get my company hired for, supplying your chairs and furniture for your new dining room. And, I run there's a hidden agenda in a sense. So let's just say that I ran Miami-Dade College, and at Miami-Dade College, I was in charge of procuring office furniture. And I have an uncle who's in the office furniture business. So I hire my uncle to go and give us office furniture. I didn't even get any bids. I didn't go out to solicit any other prices. I just hired my uncle. That's a conflict of interest. I'm a leader of this company. My goal should be to provide the best possible pricing and the best quality office furniture possible. But instead, I just hired my uncle because it's a conflict. Obviously, I want him to do business with us, and that's a problem. I should develop a committee. The committee should choose. I should have a vote. We should have five different bids. That's how the process should. And let's just say that the guy who was in charge of solidifying the infrastructure for the FIU bridges had a personal relationship with the engineer, or let's just say that's the case. And he sort of knew that the engineer wasn't doing a great job, but he kept using him anyways. So because of his personal relationship, he had a conflict of interest. Whereas he should have held that person more accountable. And it's back to, business is business. And we can't allow our conflicts of interest to get in the way of the best interest of our organization. That's not easy. I think that's the part of this class. I mean, if I like somebody and they're friends of mine, it's going to be hard for me to have some sort of power and to say fire them or do something. But truly, I should hold them more accountable. That's why nepotism is a big problem within families. I grew up obviously in a family business, and I was the president of my father's business, and he held me to a standard I would think higher than all of the other employees. And obviously, it's probably easy for me to say, but the reality is he gave me no straws. He gave me no freedoms. He made me work every day I was home from any kind of vacation. If he was working, I was working, and it was tough. I thought it was the other way around. It was reverse nepotism. But the point is, there's ways around that. There's ways to solidify that relationship up front. Let's say you have a friend and you're the human resource manager of a company and your friend needs a job and you bring him in for an interview. Let's say they interview really well and they go through the panel and they're selected. They're the best candidate. That friend comes into work and you got to have a call. You got to have a talk with that person. You got to say, listen, I know you're working here, and I want you to know that I'm going to hold you to the same standard as I hold everybody else. If you get into trouble, I gotta I gotta give you consequences because if people know, which they already do, that I'm your friend, and they see that I'm jeopardizing or giving you easier things or not as much consequences, that's a problem. So those things, those conflicts of interest can be addressed up front. So there's a lot to say there. Pressure to compromise standards, report observed misconduct, and experience retaliation for reporting. That's kind of a big deal. There's it's retaliatory, sort of malicious concept. So, all right, you're in line for promotion at your company, and you find out that somebody else, and you're likely gonna get the position. You're gonna get promoted. That's awesome, but you know that you're up against somebody else on the um, in your company, and you know that this somebody else has a pretty good. They have a good resume. They're good at what they do. You know that they're a valid competitor in a sense for this promotion. So you think that you can spread some gossip about this person that would definitely make sure that they do not get the position. And you need the position. You need to provide for your family. It's going to provide you a good career trajectory, all this kind of stuff. Do you do it? Like, do you spread that, say, gossip about the person so the person doesn't get the job? I mean, hopefully the answer is no. But the point is, if you were in that position, if you were in that seat, and you knew that there was something about this person, some TikTok video, an Instagram video that you had downloaded and saved, and they had, since deleted that you can share with the HR manager, um, would you do it? And I would hope not. I mean, maybe you would, but who knows? You can see how that is a conflict of interest in and of itself. So we talked about this last time. This is actually where we stopped last time. And there was a bit of a pivot in the 1960s by this guy Lyndon B. Johnson creating the Great Society and John F. Kennedy creating these Consumer Bill of Rights. So I'm gonna get off this page because I don't want to spend too much time with it. And I want to keep moving. But the goal of these next couple slides is to lay out the history of how business has changed over the years because this concept of capitalism was looked at differently by certain leaders. And whether you believe that capitalism does good for society or you believe capitalism isn't good for society, all the power to you. I mean, I'm a business professor. You should already infer how I feel about capitalism, and it's done amazing things for my family and my life, and it's very difficult not to espouse that and to explain that to you. So there are good things, but could we regulate it? Could we control it a bit more to ensure that the good things grow and the bad things die? And that's what they started doing is because of these tough issues and because of these organizational decisions that were unethical, they started bringing in these different lines of defense against those things. And this is kind of backdating it a little bit. In the 1920s, you want to provide a living wage. 1930s, there's a New Deal with Franklin Roosevelt, blameless business and the cause of U.S. problems. That's the whole businesses are not doing a good job. Then you got the 1950s. Then, of course, the 1960s, which we just talked about. And what you'll see in this is this theme of government trying in some way to control ethics and culture and how people should operate. And then you'll see this thing where, well, is that the role of the government? Should the government be putting regulations on companies, or should companies self-regulate? Should they have a moral code and a moral conduct based on a social contract that they should just do the right thing? I mean, why does the government have to intervene and have regulations? I mean, those are interesting things to think about. So the Reagan Bush era's belief that self-regulation rather than regulation by government was in the public interest. Now you have the 1990s, my favorite year. You got Eminem. Guess who's back? Back again. I think it was Shady's back. Tell a friend. Da-na-na. Okay, so 1990s institutionalization of business ethics. So now institutionalization means we're baking this into all things. Like there's an institution of regulatory bodies like the EEOC and the OSHA standards and the um, FDA and these other bureaucratic agencies that are trying to ensure that people are doing things correctly. And there's good bureaucratic agencies and there's regulatory bureaucratic agencies. So President Bill Clinton continued to support self-regulation and free trade, so he wasn't as much of the institutionalization. Government action with health-related social issues, such as teenage smoking, that was a major thing that Clinton did to essentially um, make the decision for the businesses. Like you're no longer going to have cigarette machines. If you remember these cigarette machines, you would go and you'd pay money. It's just like a vending machine. You'd pull the lever. My mom smoked these Capri cigarettes. They were like 3120s, and she'd send me to the store as like a 15-year-old buying for her, and they'd sell them to me back in the day. And so you can go and pull the lever, and the cigarettes would come out. It was just like popping a Diet Coke or some Doritos. You're getting cigarettes from a vending machine. That was nixed. You can't do that anymore. And the government said no to that. Is that fair? Is that free trade? Of course, in some sense, it's debatable again, good for society, smoking's bad, this kind of stuff. Well, is it? Did the people from the big rulers and the governing body and the money from the smoking industry just take their business model and bring it somewhere else? Yet to be determined. So you understand how government is now intervening in business. This was a big one in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It's fair reporting. When you had the Enron scandal, you had accounting fraud, making sure that the books, the GAAP principles, generally accepted accounting principles, are standardized. And when people report their earnings as an organization to the public, so the public can make decisions as to whether or not to buy the stock, these things have to be correct. They have to be accurate, and they have to be scrutinized by government bodies. And the FDA, the SEC is another big one there. I'm not sure if it's on here, but anyways, you get the idea. It says President Barack Obama inherited the great global financial recession. So that's tough, right? I mean, when he came into office, he was in the midst of a monster economic downturn. And there were certain things that the government did looking back that, again, I'm not trying to assert any claims, but almost needed to be done, or consumers, American citizens, would have been economically devastated. So the government intervened, and some say it was good, some say it was bad. Who knows what it looked like? But Barack Obama came out in a way of dealing with a serious issue that could have been much worse. Let's put it that way. And this was a political economic tie-in. There's a lot of interwoven aspects to that. Okay, so you got more challenges in 2010, 2020s and beyond. So this is where we are. Environmental social governance. In the prison program, I've taught this class called Change Management and Innovation, and we go through these SGA goals. They're the I'm pretty sure it's SGA, but there's like 40 sustainable development goals, SDG, possibly, yeah. And these SDG goals are uh, eradicate world poverty, make sure nobody's hungry anymore, provide education to all. There is clean water initiative, these major goals that they're trying to ask the world to be a part of. And again, debatable whether this is good, whether isn't good, whether nations should do this stuff themselves. It's whatever. But the point is, they got so excited about these things. They wanted to participate in it because they saw the social value in them. They saw that they were good. They saw the meaningful aspects of what they were doing, and governments were funding them and giving them the ability to do it. And what I'm assuming they're trying to do is they're trying to be preventative with future problems. If education is available, people aren't going to commit crimes. If you can provide people with clean water, you're not going to have to invest in their medical needs down the road because they're going to be healthier. I mean, it's all sorts of positive benefits from doing some of these things. The question is, should the government be involved in telling us to do it, or should we do it based on our own good fruition? Where did this does this moral code come from? I'm going to kind of get away from some of these definitions in a sense, because I don't want to get too caught up in them. But last class I avoided it as well, so we can't avoid it this class. There's a difference in morals, principles, and values, and certainly business ethics. It is fit into a unique realm. There's this general social good, philosophical effort ethics for the world and for, where do you what's good, what's evil, this kind of stuff, and that's sort of like a general ethics. Business is more specific. It's more process based. It's more tangible because now we need to know how we're acting in order to accomplish these goals. Like it doesn't make sense for us to all wear bathing suits to work every day because that's not going to help us get any other customers. So we have to have a dress code. So that just in and of itself should make sense to you. But we're not portraying on the business that they're ripping away human rights because they're not allowing people to wear bathing suits to work. No, that's why business ethics is a bit more, it's a little bit more grasping. There's a terminology for it, but I forget what it is. So it comprises organizational principles, values, and norms that may originate from individuals. They may come from people at some point, organizational statements, or from the legal system that primarily guide individual and group behavior in business. So that's where business ethics comes from. Principles are specific and pervasive boundaries for behavior that should not be violated. So if you have a principle, I have a principle that around children, I don't curse. I try my very best to curse. It's like try not to curse. I just don't want to do it. And it's a principle. And as soon as I violate that principle, I know I violate it and I know it's bad. So that's a principle I have. There are also principles at work. An example of a principle at work is, the common aspect of you don't leave food out in the kitchen for more than 24 hours, something, whatever. Like you just don't do it. It's a principle and it shouldn't be violated. That's what a principle is. A value is an enduring belief and ideal that are socially enforced. So values are freedom and prosperity and, again, I'm not going to get into too many examples of values, but hopefully you can see the difference between morals, business ethics, principles, and values. And we'll talk about some more examples as we go. These are some interesting slides here. So I started reading an additional business ethics book that's different than ours. That ours is written by, I'm pretty sure, a business person, and the other business ethics books that I'm writing right now is by philosophers. So sometimes companies will have this class, business ethics, within the humanities department or the philosophies department. This is the book that I started reading as well, because it inherently goes into these ways. So, what does it mean to have principles? Accepting moral principles is not just a matter of intellectual recognition, but of profound individual commitment to a set of values. Here's a funny question. Will your conscience, like the things that, hey, something's not right here, that intuition, if you listen to your conscience, is that going to lead you in the right direction? Yeah, so conscience, if I think about this movie Pinocchio, it's sort of that little bug, Jiminy Cricket. It's sort of like, oh, I'm not quite sure that's the right thing to do. And it's that person sitting on your shoulder, like, not really sure. So this says conscious people can, and unfortunately sometimes do, go against their moral principles, but we would doubt that they sincerely held the principle in question of if violating it did not bother their conscience. So all right, so you say you have a principle and you violate it, and it doesn't bother you, doesn't give you guilt. So that means it was never a principle to begin with. We have all felt the pangs of conscience. But what exactly is conscience, and how reliable a guide is it? Our conscience, of course, is not literally a little voice inside of us, even though that is the image I just painted. To oversimplify a complex piece of developmental psychology, our conscience evolved as we internalized the moral instructions of the parents or other authority figures who raised us as children. So, what that means to me is that I'm providing my children with an environment and a structure that hopefully allows them to feel comfortable and grow within it. They feel safe. They don't feel like dangerous things are going to come and eat them. So in this environment, they're seeing a routine, they're seeing practices, they're hearing how I speak. If they go to a different environment and they hear someone, let's say, scream a curse word and then act irate and maybe like, physically hit somebody, they're going to say, whoa, like my conscience has just been pinged. Something's not quite right. And it's because of the environment that I groomed them in. They know that that's not right. And that's my goal as a parent is to make sure they understand what's what's normal versus what, hey, that's not quite right. And versus, okay, so now another person is raised in a household that is somewhat abusive and potentially could, parents are arguing at times. And I was raised in such a household, to be honest. My parents were divorced when I was 8 years old, and conflict within the household was somewhat normal. And so I would go out and my friends were in conflict and my heartbeat wouldn't even increase. And I'm like, oh, this is just like another day at home. And it didn't peg my conscience. So that's kind of why conscience could lead us in the wrong direction because we may not have those that moral clarity in those difficult times. So conscience and its limits, conscience is not always a reliable guide because it can be conflicted and erroneous. Moral principles and self-interest, the morality of an action can run counter to our self-interest. So hopefully we all agree that if you don't eat for 6 days and you're hungry, and I say you have to stay in class till 8:10 and you have to participate and you can't go eat, you're not happy. Like you have a self-interest. You're not really others interested in this time. You're not really acting as a servant leader if you haven't eaten in 6 days and you're starving. And the other thing too is like you probably don't want to have a conversation about business ethics because you're just hungry. You have basic needs that need to be met. And those basic needs, there's some self-interest there. So the moral point of view requires that we restrict our self-interest to satisfy social coexistence. So are we capable of putting our self-interest to the side consistently and putting others first? And that's morality. Like what are you willing to sacrifice essentially for the good of others? In situations of conflict between moral principles and self-interest, because we all know we have moral principles, hopefully, we all have self-interest, it is important to appeal to shared principles of justification. Shared principles, now we're in an organization. Now we're guided not just by our actions, we're guided by our exchange with others, we're guided by the people that are around us. We can kind of get this positive reinforcement and classical conditioning. Where somebody said that, their daughter went to the doctors and immediately started kind of crying because they thought they were going to get a shot. Well, they probably got a shot there before, which is a negative reinforcement, or it's a punishment essentially. They don't want that, so they're conditioned to behave in a certain kind of way when they see those triggers. Okay, so this is what I was trying to think about before, and I think we could probably skip ahead to a few slides after this one, just to make sure we're done with chapter one, and then we'll close out. But what I just did there, and believe me, we're not going to do this too much in this class, is I sort of philosophized a lot of things, talk about values and morals and conscience and what's right. How do we determine this? Talked about upbringing, a conflict-oriented household versus a household that's a little bit more structured and two parents that are together. Like you can see how there's philosophy in that. The morality in the narrow sense is what this class is going to be more about. The moral principles or rules that do or should govern the conduct of individuals in their relations with others. That's what this class is about because organizations and business, that's what it's about, is how do we get people to work well together so that we can achieve a mission or goal or something like that. We're not as much interested in the morality in the broad sense, which is the values, ideals, and aspirations that influence the decisions and lifestyles of individuals and entire societies. That would be a different class. So business ethics are mainly concerned with morality in the narrow sense, but values, ideals, and aspirations also affect the behavior and ethical choices of business professionals. So at an individual level, obviously we're we're bringing ourselves to work, but bringing our own values to work is a good thing, and as long as they fit in with the values of some of the people that we're working with in some sense, because there's a social contract involved at work. So, business case for ethics and social responsibility. Why is it important that businesses consider these things? Studies have found a positive relationship between ethical and socially responsible behavior and a firm's financial performance. We talked about that last class. So, it's good for businesses to behave in an ethical manner because it builds customer trust, builds employee trust, it builds investor trust, and therefore increases performance. That's a key concept that I want you to make sure you understand. And there's science behind that. Is another reason why you should pay attention to this class. Because if you build a business or you're part of a business and you see it not operating in an ethical way, there's a performance standard there. And if you want to perform, and some of you should want to perform and do well and be helpful and constructive in the world, working for a company that's not ethical it's going to be more challenging. People prefer to work for ethical companies. The majority of customers would switch brands to do business with a company that is ethical and socially responsible. High costs are associated with ethical breakdowns. Huge costs. Think about this lady, Holmes. Let's just say she pivoted and repented and acknowledged her lies 5 years earlier. Let's just say that's the case. They may have lost a lot of their investments. They may have lost their lab. Maybe they had to fire 75% of their workforce, but they weren't nothing. They didn't no longer exist. They could have pivoted. They could have taken some existing resources. They could have found some other investors. People could have probably lifted them up and say, hey, we understand. And I admire you for telling the truth. And they could have continued the race. It's about finishing the race, right? And business is about getting the prize in a sense, but finishing the race. And an ethical blunder could take you out of the race. I was lifting this morning. Don't judge me. I was deadlifting this morning, and I was with a guy. He's a firefighter, and he's a big guy. He's way bigger than me, and he's deadlifting. I swear it was like 380 pounds. And I was just like, all right, man, like let's do the deadlift thing. And I did it, once, and I was like, all right, that was great. And then he put some more weight on, and I'm like, I'm not going to participate. I'm bowing out. And the reason why I'm bowing out because I don't want to get injured. I'm not in it. I'm not here to work out to be the best deadlifter. I just want to stay injury free. Like that's my number one goal. It doesn't make sense for me to go down that path because I can be removed from the game. Yeah, I might deadlift a bunch of money, but the downside is I could very well blow my back out and be in bed for the next 6 months. Not okay with that consequence. So I'm just not going to do it. And again, you can see the analogy there. That's what you have to think about. And this is it worth it? Yeah, you get the idea. So we think that these answers are black and white. I'm probably going to be about another 5 minutes. The answers are black and white, but there's dilemmas and situations concerning right or wrong when values are in conflict. There's ethical dilemmas, there's moral dilemmas. Right and wrong cannot be clearly defined. Ethical issues can be especially complex. And a moral agent is an individual who must make an ethical choice in an organization. So ethical dilemmas matter. There's this concept, and it's in a lot of books. Uh, one I read recently, and it's really talking about the person who is a giver versus the person who's a taker. And giving versus taking is a profound thing to think about, because it goes into that self-interest versus other interest thing. And it goes into leadership styles. And if anybody was in my leadership class here, you know how I feel about certain types of leadership styles. Leadership style should be contingent on the circumstance. Like if you're leading people into defensive posture because people are attacking your neighborhood with pitches, let's just say guns. Let's make it easy. I was thinking back in like the Beauty and the Beast days. But if they're coming after you and you need to lead a group of people to go defend your neighborhood, your leadership style should be a little bit more authoritarian. It should be more like we got to go. We got to go now. I don't have time to listen to you. We're not going to take a vote. We're not going to have a democratic leadership style here. And yeah, you can be a servant leader by being the first one running after them. There's a great scene in the Avengers. I don't. I think I'm pretty sure it was Avengers. It was the second to last Avengers, and it may have been um, the Black Panther movie, where this Black Panther guy came and they were running after the enemy, running, 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 and like the leader of the Black Panthers was running next to the other Avengers, and he's the leader, and he was the first one to like come after this enemy force, and it was a powerful scene that I'll always remember because he could have been in the back, he could have been the third one or the fourth one or the second one, he could have very well been up on the mountaintop watching it from up there, but he was the first one. He was the first in, last out kind of concept. That's a giver. And so, all right, managers who use servant leadership focus on needs of followers and encourage others to think for themselves. Giving cultures in which people help one another lead to greater sharing of information, collaboration, and effectiveness. Harvard studies showed the single biggest predictor of a team's effectiveness was the amount of help and support members gave one another. That's a good place to at least wrap up for tonight. So I hope that you can see the application of being aware of ethical standards, understanding when there's ethical issues going on, and um, having that discernment in those situations to know that there's an ethical dilemma happening here. And a big part of the takeaway of this class is to give you that supernatural ability. And so tonight we were able to see that with this lady Holmes, and also we were able to discuss some ways in which we could start the conversation on these topics. Okay, so customers, investors, and shareholders, employees, suppliers, government agencies, communities, and many others who have a stake or claim in an aspect of the company's products, operations, markets, industry, and outcomes are known as stakeholders. It's a large amount of people. Stakeholders are influenced by and have the ability to affect business. So they're influenced by business and they also have the ability to affect business. Stakeholders provide both tangible. What does tangible mean? And gentle. It has physical properties like something you can hold, and versus intangible is a service. It's a thought. It's an idea. It's a relationship is more intangible, but tangible is a physical product, something that exists in matter and in space. So stakeholders provide both tangible and intangible resources that are critical to a firm's long-term success, and their relative ability to withdraw these resources gives them power. Stakeholders define significant ethical issues in business. So if business ethics issues and conflicts revolve around relationships, this whole chapter is designed to show you the tensions that can revolve around these different stakeholder relationships and why it matters in decision making. Yeah, that's the best I can do to try to set up before we get into more of the lecture component of this. So here is the list of stakeholders. These are the slides. This is the first slide that talks about stakeholders. We're talking about customers, shareholders, employees, suppliers, government agencies, and communities. These are primary stakeholders. We'll get into this concept called secondary stakeholders in a minute. So you don't necessarily have to remember this. I don't think it's really important, but the way in which you approach your stakeholders, it depends on your management. It depends on how you see your stakeholders. It depends on everything we just talked about. Are they important? Do we care about ourselves? Okay, so if they are important, what are we going to do about it? So the normative approach to stakeholders, it identifies ethical guidelines that dictate how firms should treat stakeholders, not how they do, how they should treat them. So it's some guidelines. So remember, we talked about a code of conduct within the company, the culture. This is how we treat each other in addition to the code of conduct with our internal stakeholders, how we treat each other and how we act just with trust and loyalty and respect to one another. We also have this normative approach, which identifies ethical standards on how we operate with all stakeholders, not just with each other, but with everybody that has an impact on our company. A descriptive approach focuses on the firm's behavior. So how we should versus how we do, how we act, behavior addresses how decisions are made for stakeholder relationships. We had a situation where we had a hurricane hit in 2017, and it drastically impacted our business. And at the time, we were in the pool construction, landscaping, and pool service business. So a lot of our customers were negatively impacted by this, but we had to make a lot of decisions at this time. And remember, we operated mostly in Monroe County, a little bit in Miami-Dade, and Monroe County got crushed. And we had a decision to make. Are we going to come into work or are we not going to come into work the next day? I made a decision to say that we're going to come into work only if you can. And one of the first things we did when we came into work is we gathered our resources and our tools. We prepared for the storm. So we had some machinery, we had some equipment, we had our chainsaws ready, and we were ready to go to work. And the question is, where were we going to work? What were we going to do with these resources? And in that questioning, we got everybody who was willing to participate on a conference call. And we asked, do you know, and have you talked to so-and-so employee? Have you heard from so-and-so? We made sure that the human resource manager had reached out to and at least conversated with every single person on our team that we knew lived in these affected areas. And if they had issues, they had a tree on their house, they couldn't get out of their driveway, they, God forbid, needed a place to stay that night, we allocated our resources towards them first. So our employees came first. And then our customers. And then obviously we know that, we're going to go take care of our customers because they're in need and our phone was ringing and all this kind of stuff. So we had to decide what we were going to do in making a decision based on our stakeholder model, based on how we operated. And that worked out for us. And I share that story to this day because I think it is important to prioritize our internal employees first above our customers. I mean, we could have went out and we could have probably probably billed a $10,000 more that day because we chose to service our employees first and give them these resources so they can be functional in the world so we can help them. Yeah, that was a net negative to us, but in the long run, likely they were loyal and dedicated employees because of that. Okay, so the instrumental approach describes what happens if firms behave in a particular way. So not only are we planning to understand how our stakeholders impact our decisions, then we make decisions to affirm some of those prioritizations, and then we understand, okay, how did those decisions impact our organization? Describes what happens if firms behave in a particular way. So if we were constantly prioritizing our employees over our customers, that might not be the right thing to do, but eventually we had to bring them together, somehow mesh them. So primary stakeholders we talked about. Secondary stakeholders are important as well, and we haven't talked about them yet. Secondary stakeholders are stakeholders who do not typically engage directly in transactions with a company and are therefore not essential to its survival, but they're still stakeholders. Here are some examples. Media. If the media is on the wrong side of your organization, or if you were to do something that got media attention that was negative, that could be a difficult thing for your business. The media can affect your business. You could possibly affect them, but it could be a good thing. Your media attention is not always a bad thing. It could be a good thing. Trade associations, and special interest groups. So these are also people who are impacted by the actions of your business. A lot of companies within the construction industry, they would volunteer to be on these trade association groups as leaders within a group so that they can influence trends within their industry. And those trends matter. They can have a voice in those conversations. So stakeholder interaction model, this approach recognizes other stakeholders are explicitly acknowledges that dialogue exists between a firm's internal and external environments. That's obvious. Internal environment is your facilities, your employees, your culture, your management team. That's your internal environment. Then the general environment is your suppliers, your customers, your competitors, and then the external environment is the political interest, the economic interest, the technological interest. So it kind of goes off from there. So those are just the kind of, I guess, different things happening within the organizational environment. So to take a stakeholder orientation, let's pause on that for a second. Ask yourself, whatever company you're working for, whatever company you're thinking about working for, if you believe that the stakeholder model is important. And I'm going to attempt to steelman a different argument in a second, and you'll understand why. But if you believe that taking a stakeholder orientation is important, or if you believe that stakeholders are important, then you want your firm to take a stakeholder orientation. So what does that mean? It's the degree to which, because some people say, yeah, we care about our stakeholders, but we don't care about them at like a level of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. We care about them like a 3. The degree to which a firm understands and addresses stakeholder demands. So it's not just about, hey, we say we take a stakeholder orientation, but when our community comes in and asks us to sponsor a soccer team, are we willing to do so? Do we invest into the beautification of our streets? Do we have somebody on a regular basis walk around our bricks and mortar shop and pick up the trash around the street? Do we bring, cupcakes over to the local firefighters? Are we doing things because we care about these people? Who are the people, and what do we actually do for them? Activities that address stakeholder demands include organization-wide generation of data about stakeholder groups and assessments of the firm's effects on these groups, distribution of information throughout the firm, responsiveness of the organization as a whole to this information. So one of the things that when I go out and I work with these companies that are in the electricity industry, and in the electricity industry, these are electric cooperatives. They're in charge of distribution of electricity. So somebody generates the electricity and they're in charge of the infrastructure, down the line, they say, of who gets the power. And if your power goes out, the electric cooperative linemen go and service the lines. They're the ones who fix the power outages. Very, very important. And the community cares about them. And how the model works, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, is but they elect people from the community because they're cooperatives to represent the board of directors for the local cooperative. And that board of directors selects the management team. And some of the things that are happening within the electric cooperative industry, or just the electric industry in general, is things are changing. And in order to change things that are happening within an organization, you have to say, okay, why are we changing? Who's going to be impacted by these changes? And the people who are going to be impacted by the changes, you bring them into the conversation, identify relevant stakeholders, identify concerns about the business that are relevant to each stakeholder group. So, for instance, the electric cooperative industry, you have the government certainly interested in how things operate. The members or the customers that are receiving the electricity, they matter. The linemen who are risking their lives to climb these poles and fix the electricity, they're stakeholders, aren't they? How about the administrative support team that work within a co-op to send bills, that collect money from customers or members? Do they matter? So the question is, if we're changing, if things are dynamic within this company, are we bringing all of those people into one place, and are we talking through these changes and how these changes are going to impact them? Okay. And then you evaluate the impact on the issues of importance to the various stakeholders identified. The more we bring stakeholders into the conversation early and often, the more we solicit their feedback, likely the change is going to be easier to implement because they're a part of the conversation with us. And we obviously have a lot of data about these stakeholders as well. It is essential for information gathering to be circulated throughout the firm. A stakeholder orientation is not complete without including activities that address stakeholder issues. Skip over this one for a second. I like the visuals. Okay, we mentioned culture, and we talked about how culture is an internal organizational factor. This is very important to consider. How culture impacts our treatment of stakeholders. If our culture is weak, we're not, our employees observing favorable outcomes is also low. Strength of organizational culture is low. Our employees observing favorable outcomes for our stakeholders is also low. If our culture gets stronger, as obviously you see weak leaning, strong leaning, and then strong, 85% is strong. And these are employees observing favorable outcomes of their organization on the stakeholders. The example I was also going to delineate from our organization is that during this hurricane time, it was about a month and a half later, and we were still packed busy. We were working 7 days a week. I was working 10, 12-hour days nonstop. And our teams were coming in, we're paying them overtime, and we were giving them opportunities to work and paying them good money to do so. Obviously, a lot of our customers needed pool and landscape work after a hurricane. But eventually, we were doing this quarterly. We partnered with a company called Caring for Miami through Christ Fellowship Church. And Caring for Miami does these backpacking events. And the backpacking events, they matter. Let me just play you a quick video if I can find it from the backpacking event. But the purpose that I was trying to say with that is my father said, hey, listen, son, I know you're busy and I know that we're serving customers, but we made a commitment to the community, especially the children that go to Florida City Elementary School, that we were going to pack these backpacks for the kids that may not have enough to eat at home. And you better believe that we're going to do that. If we have if we're too busy, I'm not going to use that excuse. I'm not going to wait another day. This is my father talking, that those kids are going to go home hungry because we decided that we were going to prioritize our customers and our internal stakeholders. We needed to impact these kids. So let me show you.
I can't tell you exactly what the stories are going to look like for every child that's going to receive food because of this event, but it will make a difference in at least 100 children's lives just because of the packing today.
Turn your magic on. To me she'd say everything you want to dream away. We are legends every day.
I'm super excited to be here and be a part of this. It's amazing. Grateful to be here, as I said, and I love my company, and I'm glad that we're able to contribute to the community, and I just want to keep on doing this every single month. I'm excited.
Sending love and joy to these kids for the weekend so they can have their stomachs full and their hearts full.
So 1,300 kids being fed by Christ Fellowship's Caring for Miami division. Reef Tropical's adding 100 to it, and the southernmost school in Dade County. So we're really happy to be doing it. The volunteers are overwhelming, so thank you all for coming in.
So I think the most important thing that we're doing today is that we're trying to plant a seed with this food and with this backpack in the hearts of the kids and in the hearts of the families so that they change and try to do something inside their soul to make them better people. I mean, that's the main reason why we're doing this, and it's just a blessing to be a part of. So thank you so much.
Sky can say we are omen. I feel my heart beating. I feel my heart beneath my skin. I feel my heart beating. 'Cause you make me feel like I'm alive again. Alive again.
It's been an honor. Looking forward to working with Reef Tropical. My name is Panos Cortises. I'm the Executive Director of Caring for Miami. Caring for Miami is a nonprofit organization that exists to serve the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of the people here in Miami. And so we do that through our backpack program and through another program we call Project Smile, where we have dentists that are volunteers that go out and they serve people that don't have insurance, and we take care of their teeth. So those are both of our programs, and it's a blessing to do what we get to do.
More than I want to share it with you.
We obviously really loved doing that, and we didn't consider that to be work. We considered that to be a part of our duty and trying to serve our stakeholders. And I mean, of the obvious portion of it is it's did bring together our employees, and they were able to bond over it as well, and therefore we had a strong culture. So you can see how employees observing favorable outcomes, they can see that their impact here at the business was providing food in addition to serving customers and doing the things that we do as an organization. We're adding value to customers. With the value we add to customers, we can bring those types of things like Caring for Miami, so we can provide value to our community as well. So the antithesis of that, and I want to bring this about, the antithesis of that is this: that a company that performs better and doesn't say do the backpacking event, but instead takes all of that money and reinvests back in the company, or say reinvest back into the employees. I mean, that backpacking event costs us about $2,500 every time we put on an event of buying the food items and being able to deliver the food items and all this kind of stuff. And we did it once a quarter. So let's just say it's $10,000 a year. We could take that $10,000 a year and we can give employees raises. And there were some of our employees were actually, they would have preferred that. They want to get paid money. And those raises would have been put in the community as well, because the employees lived in the community. And also those raises would have paid tax dollars to local municipalities, and those tax dollars would have made the roads better. So the antithesis to the argument is that a company is not meant to do, corporate social responsibilities events, and yeah, the stakeholders are important, but the community operates based on tax dollars. And the more money we can bring in tax dollars, the more profit essentially our company can make, the more taxes that the community can get. And that's our contribution, is profit. And so companies' prime role is to increase shareholder value and increase profits. Because when we increase shareholder value and increase profits, the communities benefit, the shareholders benefit, the suppliers benefit, everybody benefits. So that's the, I guess, the steelman of the opposite of the argument. And that argument, if you really reflect, has some validity to it, has a lot of validity to it. And some people in this class might actually say, you know what, that argument makes sense. And I think that's good. And wrestling with those ideas is very important. I've been on both camps, both sides. And it also depends. It depends on the industry. It depends on the leader. It depends on the company. So this because that's a real line. The company is meant to increase shareholder value, and the company is meant to make profits and doesn't really have much business in this whole care for the community concept. All right, so this map right here, this brings in the primary shareholders, sorry, the primary stakeholders and the secondary stakeholders. So if you look in the middle, you see your customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, community, government agencies, and you see how they sort of interact with one another. The company is getting buried in the middle. And then on the outside peripheral, you see the secondary stakeholders, which are trade associations, competitors, and the mass media, special interest groups. Competitors is an interesting one because the better your competitors are in some sense, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing for you. Let me give you an example. The more McDonald's does well, and the more McDonald's attracts people to fast food, sometimes Burger King is like a byproduct of the growth of the fast food industry because McDonald's is leading the way and Burger King is sort of like in their wake. It doesn't necessarily mean Burger King isn't benefiting from McDonald's success. Hopefully that makes some sense. Because people want alternatives. Just because one company is doing well, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not other customers to serve within the dynamic. I think that's an interesting point to consider is that your competitors, yes, that you're competing against them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their demise is a good thing for you. I mean, in some instances, if it's direct competition, it might be the case because you pick up their business. But I think you can understand the relationship between competitors. It matters, especially if you're in a small industry. And let's just say, here's a fun one. In the pool industry, a lot of people would say, they'd say to me, these are some of the customers, and this isn't necessarily a good thing to say, but they'd say, Claude, you're the best of the worst alternatives. Meaning we struggled at times serving customers in the pool industry. It wasn't always easy. Um, and our customers knew that. Like we were sort of a pain in the butt sometimes, but we were better than our competitors, meaning we still, we're still better than them. So I don't know if that's a compliment. But the point is, I think that our ability to be good set a standard for the industry. And that standard made some of our competitors act better, compete harder, try harder. They had to improve their own operations in order to keep up with us. Not that we were, explicitly amazing, but the point is that if your competitor's good, sometimes I can indirectly give you incentive to be good as well. All right, so social responsibility and business ethics. So social responsibility, I remember we're talking about the stakeholder perspective and the stakeholder orientation. Now we're kind of shifting into what does it look like in action, and what does it look like to be socially responsible? Ethics and social responsibility are not the same, but are interrelated. Social responsibility is an organization's obligation, not a desire or want, but an obligation to maximize its positive impact on stakeholders and minimize its negative impact. So that's what social responsibility says, is that we have an obligation to do this. In the presentation today with the women leaders, let me see if I could find this website. There's a lady named Marion from Oka Aquatics. If anybody has been in the Oka Aquatics swim school, my brother was in this swim school, and this swim school is awesome. And the CEO, founder of this particular operation, was speaking today, and she was jiving with the triple P, the triple bottom line, planet, people, and profits. And she understood obligation to community. And what she did, which was very admirable. Let's see if here we go. 1% for the planet. Through 1% for the planet, Oak Aquatic shows its dedication to protecting the environment. We're happy to work with partners who care about sustainability like we do by donating 1% of our yearly earnings. That's a big deal. I mean, say you're making, I don't know, $100,000 a year. What is it, $10,000? No, that would be $1,000 to donate to environmental sustainability is a big deal. I mean, $100,000 isn't a ton of money. Let's say you're making $1 million a year. So now you're donating $10,000. It's a lot. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a commitment. And so here are some of the partners that they work with. But I guess what I'm trying to get to with Oak Aquatics is it's actually a employee ran company. So the employees own it. Let's see if we have some description of that, right, team? Join our management team. Oak Aquatics is constantly growing, but we have to offer benefits for our team, opportunities for growth, leadership, and career development, Red Cross certification for CPR, lifeguard, and paid training, pay time off holiday hours, 401k tuition reimbursement, apply now. So how to make a difference, Lynn? Okay, so it doesn't talk too much about it because I feel like it's fairly new, but this is what she said. She said that if you come to Oak Aquatics and you know nothing about swimming, that's fine. I can teach swimming. She's like, we teach swimming here. So we have no problem coaching you on how to swim and how to teach other people how to swim. That's not the problem. what we want is we want people with a positive attitude, a joyful spirit. We want people who are kind-hearted, people who like to be around other people. We care about the character virtues way more than the talent. So character over talent is what wins for us here. And if you have the right character, come and join our team and we'll teach you what you need to know to be a good swim coach. That's somebody who truly sees the dynamic between the people, the profits, the company, what they do for work and how that has an impact. I mean, she just a great example and great company of what we're talking about here as far as social responsibility. So there are 4 levels of social responsibility. There's economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic. Corporate citizenship, the extent to which businesses strategically meet the economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibilities placed on them by various stakeholders. That's a lot of responsibility. So you're a small business and you're doing $100,000 a year and you make $15,000 in profit and you pay yourself $25,000 and everything else is cost. So you might have 1 employee, 2 employees, whatever, small business. And then in addition to that, you have to think about all these stakeholders. So are you meeting economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibilities placed on you by your stakeholders? Do you have a responsibility to give to your community and give to philanthropy? Or is that your choice? And I know that's kind of the dynamic we're talking about here. And then of course, the bigger and more influential you get, does that decision change? So for interrelated dimensions, strong sustained economic performance, rigorous compliance, ethical actions beyond what law requires. Beyond law requires. We talked about the difference between what's ethical and what's legal. Just because it's not illegal doesn't mean it's ethical. So just because you're not breaking the law doesn't mean you should still do it. Reputation, a big deal. A corporation's image and the intangible assets with tangible value. So and this is sort of a personal story, I guess. And I think some of you enjoy when I share some of these personal nuances. Let's see if I have an ability to search for this. Motivating change. I don't think I have an image for you, but so we wrote on the side of our building for a long time. We still own the building in Florida City. Let me get this picture out of here. And what we wrote on the side of the building is that true greatness is found in serving others. True greatness is found in serving others. It's sort of a philosophy that I live by, and I actually wrote a book called Deemed Essential: Finding Greatness Through the Business of Serving Others. I believe in that. And we had all the right to put it up there, and we had it up there for about 2 years. And then we sold a good portion of the business. We retained just a little bit. We kept the building, but we leased the building out entirely. So we one person pays all the rent. We have a couple of different tenants, but the primary tenant pays the majority of the rent. And in their lease, they could make minor alterations to the building, and they certainly still had to take care of the building, even though we were getting the rent for it, and still are. But what they did was they painted over that. It no longer says on the side of the building, "True greatness is found through serving others." They didn't believe in it. It wasn't something that they represented. So what the reason why I told that story is because we had a reputation as an organization prior to the sale that we truly did care about the community, care about employees, and care about other stuff. But the new owner, maybe not so much, and that's okay. I'm not, condemning him for it, but that's not a message that he was espousing. And he cared about a different reputation, quality of service, affordability, whatever that message was. So a corporation's image and an intangible asset with tangible value. I'm gonna read that again. Reputation is a corporation's image. So the image, when you think about Jiffy Lube, when you think about Southwest Airlines, when you think about Microsoft, what do you think about? Like, what's the image that's in your mind? And so, a corporation's image that's in your mind and the intangible asset, your thoughts about it, your feelings about it, the services you've received with tangible value, because that image you have has value. It will bring you to something called purchase intention. If the image is good, you will have a stronger intention to purchase from that company. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Yes.
This one. I saw the microphone thing wasn't going up as high, so I had my Yeti microphone. Okay, so reputation matters. And if reputation matters, when people think about your company, what do they think of? Issues and social responsibility. Social responsibility rests on a stakeholder's orientation, meaning the higher your stakeholder orientation, your social responsibility obviously is going to increase. Long-term relationships with stakeholders, that's a big deal. Long-term relationships with stakeholders. A company comes into an environment. I think about Miami-Dade College. Miami-Dade College isn't going anywhere. The name of the college is Miami-Dade College. It can't go to another state. Miami-Dade College really, truly cares about the long-term impact that this education that you're getting here has on you and your career. They want it to be long-term, not short-term. They want to prepare you for the job market. They're not interested in just getting you through this class. It's a curriculum design. So it's a long-term orientation. social and versus a company that may not have as much of a long-term orientation and doesn't have high social responsibility because maybe they're just coming. Let's look at an industry that comes into town and just does work it temporarily, like construction would be a good example, and brings in a bunch of people from out of town to work. They pay them $1,000 a day. I don't know how much they pay them to do very difficult work, to build a building, and then that developer no longer develops here, goes to another state, goes to another area. They may not be as long-term oriented with the local community. So it's a different relationship. Social issues are associated with the common good. These can relate directly or indirectly to the business. That's a funny one. The common good. I venture to ask you to briefly tell me what the common good is. It's an ethical issue, right? Like what's good for all? What's common good? I mean, obviously, you could say freedom, independence, economic prosperity, but really, is that the common? Is that for all people or just some people? So food and water, safety, these are the lower level needs. This is things that are good for that. I think that's a good argument. That's a common good. What kind of food? Where's the food grown? Is the food really good for everybody? Maybe we should be hunters and gatherers again. Maybe buying from the grocery stores isn't a good idea. I don't necessarily agree with that, but um, who knows? Maybe it's the right perspective. It's an ethical issue. Okay, so major issues today include data privacy. We all can understand that. Paying LifeLock like $200 a year, maybe more, to just simply make sure nobody pulls my credit. Meaning, if somebody tries to pull a credit card out in my name, LifeLock tells me. So I have to pay $200 a year just so somebody doesn't steal from me. I mean, there's more than I'm paying the $200 a year so people don't steal from me. But think about it. Your malware, we're always trying to protect everything all around us. And that's an issue. Consumer protection is a big deal. Why do we care about consumers? Well, consumers can be taking advantage of businesses. Let's think about this price gouging. And I'm only going to use this one example because during a hurricane, it is very real that the price of generators skyrockets. And after a while, you have to think that the price of generators, somebody should be looking at these people selling generators and saying these people are in serious need. They have no power. They've been out of power for a month, and you're selling them a generator for 6 times what it's worth. No, 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 that's not good. And certain companies will come in and regulate that. The free market eventually regulates that, but sometimes price gouging can be a thing. The pharmaceutical industry is really getting scrutinized a lot now. And people want to protect the consumer. Do we need medication? Do we need these kinds of things? How about the food industry and the preservatives and the chemicals within food? These things are meant to protect consumers from the corporate takeovers, in a sense. Very fascinating conversation. Corporate governance is to develop a formal systems and accountability, oversight, and control. And this is a big one. All right, so you're in a company, and you're morally sound, and you care about ethics. You've taken this class. Congratulations. You now have the ethical sixth sense, or the ethical spidey sense, or the ethical Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Awesome. So now, how does the corporation and the structure and the way in which the company makes decisions, how can you influence that? And how is that governed? And who's in charge of that? Who elects the people that are in charge of that? Who holds them accountable? So I'm on the board of directors for a very large condominium that my wife and I own up in Dadeland, and it's called Toscano Condominiums. It's a big condominium complex, and we moved there, and we owned it for a long period of time, and then we had kids, so we like needed to find another place to live. So now we live in the Redlands, but we still own this condo, so we rent it. And for about 3 years now, I have been on the board of directors of this condominium, and I no longer live there. So, but I'm still on the board of directors. So, is it right for me to be on the board of directors? I'm in charge of governing this condo. And so the purpose of that, so there's 5 people on the board of directors. There's like a treasurer, I'm the vice president, there's the president, there's the director, and I think, director and the secretary. So 5 people, elected people from the homeowners association that represent this entire place. There's like 305 condos. And we're very conscientious. We're very strict about the way in which we make decisions. We have meetings every quarter. We have to have a open meeting for everybody to attend. We have to have votes. We have to make sure that we call meetings to order. We have to take meeting minutes. We have to share the meeting minutes. This is governance. And we always have to check ourselves about our intentions with using the budget. There's like, a ton of money. I'm actually not allowed to share with you the details. I would, but I can't because I'm governed by the documents of the association, the governing documents, to make sure that the board represents the owners in an ethical manner. That's what these documents are for. There's a whole legal process, a whole way of doing things so that the checks and balances are in place, that my looking at the ring of power and wanting to put it on and say, look at me, I have influence and I can choose who to hire and fire. But the reality is, no, I can't, because number one, my fellow board members will see that. Number two, if it goes against the governing documents, and also we need votes. So I don't have all the power. So there's checks and balances and governance to make sure that we're representing the association, we're representing the best interest of the owners to the best of our ability. Very important. Just through a story alone, I can tell you that's what governance is. And a person that has a conflict of interest should not be on the board of directors. So that's something to talk about. I want to mention this guy, Adam Smith, because capitalism is a big deal. And I want to just say three things about capitalism that are very fundamental. Number one, free trade. Capitalism does not exist without free trade. Number two is property rights. Knowing that I own this water bottle means I own the water bottle. I put my name on it, and my neighbor can't come over and take it from me and just say, I'm sorry, I'm bigger and stronger than you, so I'm going to take this water bottle. No, I own this. And property rights are fundamental in capitalism. And then the third one is contract law. So free trade, property rights, and contract law. And if those three pillars exist, capitalism can flourish. Contract law is, if I agree that I'll pay, $200,000 for this house, and you give me the keys to the house, and I take possession of the house, I'm obligated via contract to give you $200,000. If that contract law was not enforceable, I would just take the key to the house and I'd say, sure, I'll give you $200,000. And I'd move into the house. I have my whole family live in the house. And, you know, I won't pay him $200,000 because who cares? The contract's not enforceable, but the contract is enforceable. And therefore I must pay $200,000, or the police can come and evict me from that house because it's not technically mine. That's kind of blurs the line between, what's it called, property rights and contract law, but those are one and the same. Okay, so capitalism is important to understand because that's what we're sort of talking about here, business ethics. And so Adam Smith was really the founder of capitalism. And what that means is that he theorized a lot of the ways that the human systems will interact around capitalism, some of the stuff I talked about. And what he talked about is this thing called the invisible hand. An invisible hand means that self-interest isn't necessarily a bad thing. So consider this. If everybody in this class just simply did their work, participated in discussion, read all of the chapters in the book, and did everything they needed to do for their own best interest so that they get an A. My argument is that the class will be better because of it. So here's what this looks like in society. If everybody just wakes up in the morning and goes to work and does their fair share and cleans up around their house and make sure they take their garbage out and make sure that they're not doing anything crazy, if they just take care of their own things, that therefore everybody will benefit, because to each their own, you know what I mean? And then the community thrives. So that's the invisible hand concept with Adam Smith, if that makes sense. So Smith established normative expectations for motives and behaviors in his theory about the invisible hand. Evidence suggests caring about the well-being of stakeholders leads to increased profits. All right, a couple more slides and we'll be done for the night. Just 5 more minutes. Yeah. All right. So corporate governance provides formalized responsibilities to stakeholders. Most businesses operate under the assumption that the purpose of business is to maximize profits for shareholders. We talked about that. The stakeholder model places the board of directors in the position of balancing the interests and conflicts of the company's various constituents. So when we talk about shareholders, we're talking about profits and shareholders. So that's not all the stakeholders. That's just profits and that's just employees, or it's really just shareholders, increasing value of the company. When we go to the stakeholder model, now the board of directors approach, which is governing, in a different kind of way, is approaching it from a stakeholder's perspective. External control of corporations resides with government regulators and key stakeholders. Social responsibility activities have a positive impact on consumer identification with an attitude towards the brand. Fiduciaries. What's a fiduciary? Does anybody know? So the term fiduciaries is like they have a financial responsibility to the best interest of the company. So truly, a good fiduciary makes the right decisions financially to benefit the people in the company. So my mom passed away in 2021, and lovely woman, amazing, and she had an estate, and all of her assets were liquidated and put into this estate. And my uncle was the executor of the estate. So my uncle had a fiduciary responsibility to myself and my 2 sisters, because I have these 2 sisters. So his fiduciary responsibility to myself and his 2 sisters means that when he takes the money and liquidates everything, that he has to sell the house at fair market value. He's not going to sell the house half just because he wants to get the job done and he wants to be done with being his executor role of the estate. He should sell the house as a fiduciary to myself and my sisters. That's his role. So I use that example because it might put it in perspective. That's the same role for people who control resources within the company. Your goal isn't to just get something done. Your goal is to get it done in a fiscally responsible manner for the best interest of not just you making yourself look good, but for the people within the organization. It's a fiduciary. It's a wonderful word to use, a duty of care duty of diligence, duty of loyalty, powerful concepts. Powerful concepts. I'm a fiduciary of my kids. I mean, my kids have no idea. My little one's in the tub right now. She's barely 2 years old, and she has no idea that what I'm doing at this moment is working so that I can provide a future for her. I have a duty of care and a duty of loyalty to my family, and the decisions I make are going to impact their future. I think I'm going to be done with that line. I think that's a good line to end the night on. And maybe I'll pick up on some of this stuff next time. But as you can see, I love talking about it. I'm really happy that you all enjoyed or hopefully enjoyed my Lord of the Rings references. And I will be here at the end of class. If you guys have any questions, I'll stick around. But go make the right duty of care and duty of loyalty decisions for you and your family and for the stakeholders in your life. I'll see you on Wednesday.